A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to you all to the 25th edition of the Bengaluru Tech Summit, which is one of the Asia's most prestigious and largest technology summits, organized by the Department of Electronics, Information Technology, Biotechnology, and Science and Technology, and co-hosted by the Software Technology Parks of India. It is indeed an eventful occasion, as this is the first full-fledged, on-ground version of Bengaluru Tech Summit post the pandemic. The central theme of BTS 2022 is Tech for Next Gen, and will focus on electronics, information technology, deep tech, biotechnology, startups, and future technologies. As always, we have an interesting lineup of speakers, of very eminent and distinguished speakers for all the sessions, including this session as well. And we start our first session for the day, which is on digital public goods, which is breakthroughs in DPG implementation. I would now request our keynote speaker, Mr. Nitin Mishra, who is the Chief Technology Officer and President of Open Network for Digital Commerce, to please come on stage to deliver his keynote address. Mr. Nitin Mishra leads technology vertical at ONDC, he led the technology vertical at GSTN, one of the most complex and largest tax reform India has ever witnessed, integrating across government, private, and public sector in record time. He's a founding member of a startup that focused on retail analytics. He has extensive experience transforming business imperatives in banking and finance, EDA, systems integration, etc., in line with technological innovations and current trends. I welcome you, sir. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Namaskara, Bengaluru. Hegidara. A little bit of Kannada that I picked up while I was in Bangalore. Good morning, everyone. Let me start with more formal notes. Thank you to the organizers to giving ONDC, a stage to talk about what we have done, what we are trying to do, and try to demystify some of the, cryptic perception that has been built around ONDC. So commerce has been under a continuous evolution, and commerce on internet has been under continuous evolution over the last 20 years, right? We've started with a simple listing of items and products on a website to a complete life cycle of transaction, which basically happens on the internet. However, what has happened over the last 20-25 years, I think while the stage has been set, this is the reality which we have witnessed, right? There are about 12 million small Kirana stores, and we have taken Kirana and grocery as a theme, who are present in India conducting their businesses, out of which only about 15,000 of them who have actually been online. And we are trailing much behind some of our peer economies like China, UK, and trailing much behind than in US, where the penetration itself has crossed 50%. What are the challenges with the current setup? What has happened over time is, while the commerce evolution has happened, it happened on the backbone of technology. Now there are some people who are, or there were some organizations who are in the leading edge of innovation, have actually been able to capture most of the market. But with that, there are few large players who captured and who created monopolistic policies, right? And we keep talking to smaller retailers and smaller businessmen. What we come to hear, from them is that these monopolistic policies have actually increased the cost pressure on their, products and services. These monopolistic policies, information asymmetry, what is in demand at what time, what is the right price, creating artificial demand-supply gaps to jack up prices, and then of course squeeze, revenues from the other. All these practices we have seen and we have heard, from the smaller merchants that we have been working with. So what is the solution to all this, right? What is India's offering is at this particular moment, and as I said, this is India's decade. India is actually leapfrogging and taking lead in providing some of these solutions. The idea was to unbundle from large monolith platforms where both the buyers and the sellers are interacting on the same platform to an unbundled network-centric approach, right? Where each e-commerce ecosystem player can actually operate in their own domain and also gain value by interacting with each other on interoperable standard. So the whole e-commerce space has been unbundled. And when I say it has been unbundled, it is like Unlike earlier where a logistics, a buyer and a seller are required to be on the same platform, today ONDC and ONDC-driven standards are ensuring that the buyer and the logistics and the seller platform can be on any platform and still be able to interact with each other on standard as long as they talk the same grammar. One of the very common question that I get when I talk to people, when they ask what is ONDC, a very common perception around ONDC is that this is a platform. We have a large catalog and inventory of items. There is something called, buyer.ondc.org and I can log in. ONDC is not a platform. ONDC is not in the business of e-commerce. ONDC is a business of facilitation. ONDC is an organization which is actually developing standards, protocols, where two e-commerce entities can talk to each other. We are also, as part of facilitation, developing the development kits, the standardized way of reconciliation and settlement of money flow in the ecosystem. We are also establishing standards for the issues and grievance management, all driven by the participants. So it is primarily a participant and the ecosystem-driven initiative rather than an organization or a central-driven initiative. ONDC is not going to have a platform. If you guys are looking for an ONDC portal or an app to buy, please don't do that. There are participants which are registered on our portal. Please go and connect with one of those participants to perform your e-commerce purchases. These are some of the founding principles, right? Effectively, decentralization. There is no central focal point. All transactions on network happens peer-to-peer. Interoperability, right? Somebody would have developed a platform on let's say, Java or PHP can actually talk to somebody who's developed the platform on, let's say, Slang or Golang. Everything is open standard. If you go to GitHub, look for ONDC official, whatever ONDC is actually publishing, even in the draft stages, everything is up there available. We have published a lot of papers, a lot of protocols, inviting comments from the larger tech community. Please feel free to visit those GitHub portal and then start providing your comments. Facilitation. The only role ONDC plays in an e-commerce transaction is discovery. After discovery, it is pretty much peer-to-peer. And that is the role of ONDC. ONDC is not only facilitating the discovery, they are also facilitating the whole interoperable framework that is being developed by the respective participants. We are hand-holding people with technology, with limited technology resources. We are enabling the large ecosystem players, or large technology giants, to develop softwares which are low touch or zero touch. All of those things are part of the facilitation initiative that ONDC is right now working on. How does it work? A typical scenario where it used to be, as I said, a closed system, a platform for all logistics, for seller platform, buyer platform, even for issues and grievance management, to a completely unbundled, disparate network, where a buyer could be sitting on any app as a platform, and a seller could be on any aggregator platform, and they can still be able to transact and exchange values with each other. And this is something which is very, very unique in its own sense, because effectively, built on top of experiences that we have had, that India has had with UPI, with Aadhaar. The same inspiration has been drawn into ONDC to create a completely democratized network. There is absolutely no need, as long as the participants are within the regulatory framework, they don't have to, talk to anybody in the network, but be able to transact peer-to-peer. How are we democratizing? Something that is one of the missions that ONDC has. We basically are helping the technology providers by defining standards and protocols to enable small merchants to come on board. They really don't have to go to the large existing market players. They can actually become a network participant on their own by simply trying to do their business and only using low touch or no touch softwares to get up and running as a marketplace. And this is something that is coming up. A few participants have already submitted white papers, and they are ready with their prototypes. So that is how we are enabling and democratizing the network. So far, the focus of the concentration of e-commerce has been primarily around the urban areas of tier 1, tier 2 cities. I think as a next step, we are going down to the rural scape. The software and the platforms there are focus platforms who basically are looking at rural economy and rural produces and trying to bring them into the urban ecosystem and integrating them into the mainstream commerce. As I said, bringing non-tech savvy buyers, you don't have to really understand the intricacies and technology related complications. You can be simply, by a push of a button, you can be up and running and defining your catalog. So that is the direction that we are going on. We are trying to create a platform and a framework where it's absolutely easy for anyone to use. You don't have to be a tech savvy as long as you are able to use your phone or you are able to use basic internet. You should be able to conduct your businesses. This is what our pipeline currently looks like, and I'm really scared when I throw this slide up because it is changing with every passing hour. We are getting new participants signing up with us. We are getting new participants joining us. This 22 number that I updated last evening has already gone up to about 24. This 500 plus number is continuously evolving and continuously changing. The 50 plus participants, which we expect to take live in next few days. So that is the current state, what ONDC is looking like. These are some of the opportunities. You are all tech community, and I welcome you. I invite you to come and innovate with ONDC. You can develop your SDKs. We are looking at a concept called ONDC in a box. We are inviting white papers there. Please come build for it. Lightweight apps, super apps, intuitive guided buying experiences. This is one area of interest that ONDC will be focusing on now. If you can participate and collaborate and create something which is very, very unique and changes the way the buyer experiences are driven in e-commerce, will be really great. Some of the things that we are working on, online dispute resolution. Effectively, a dispute is key to any transaction. We are trying to bring up a framework. The paper is already there. You are invited to have a look at the paper and provide your comments. Reconciliation settlement, one of the fundamental pillars of innovation within ONDC. Unlike how the reconciliation and settlement happens today between the buyer and the seller, we are basically creating a framework, or we have defined a framework again there on ONDC with the ONDC GitHub with feedbacks. Please, I invite you to go and read and provide comments there. Last but not the least, ONDC is a concept from India to the world. Like UPI is going global, we expect ONDC also to take that leap with help of the participants. Please note, we are an ecosystem-driven initiative. We are not an organization, trying to redefine everything. It is actually an evolutionary concept. I invite the whole tech community across India, and then, of course, at some point in time across globe, to come and participate with us. With that, I come to an end. I hope I have been able to meet my time. Thank you so much for hearing me out. I'll be available for any question and answers later. Thank you so much.
I now request the rest of the panelists to please come on stage. Mr. Sanjay Anandaram, who's a co-founder of NICEorg, Mr. Shankar Maruwada, who's a co-founder and CEO of EkStep, and Mr. Hrushikesh Mehta, who's a co-founder and chief evangelist of CredAll, Mr. Kiran Anandampillai, who's advisor technology of National Health Authority, and Mr. BG Mahesh, who's a co-founder of Sahamati. Welcome, gentlemen. And Mr. Sanjay Anandaram, who is going to be the moderator for this session. I now hand over the session to Mr. Sanjay.
Great. So good morning, everybody. Job number one is to make sure that the mic works. It does, so good news. So thanks, Nitin, for that, for providing us the overview and context about India's pioneering digital public goods. And what we saw was one manifestation of that in action. India has pioneered digital public goods around the world. We have conceptualized, designed, developed, deployed DPGs at scale and under multiple use cases. And therefore, the breakthrough in DPG implementations is what we will talk of today. And we've got a very, very eminent group here who pretty much cover all the key implementations of DPGs that exist today. And all of these are pioneers globally. I want you to sort of understand that. And therefore, what you're going to hear from them is something that very, very few people around the world have imagined. So what I'm going to do now is start off with a question to all the panelists. And that is, given that India has done these DPGs and there are multiple use cases that each one of you represents, what is the set of learnings, the to-dos and not to-dos, to enable a successful implementation of a DPG? It's all very well to have something on paper, have a slide deck, but when the rubber meets the road, there are all kinds of challenges, right? And therefore, how do you orchestrate a successful DPG? I'll start with Shankar, and then we go down the panel.
Okay, good morning, everybody. When you're designing DPGs, the first thing is to think like a nation or a country and not like an organization. Because when you think like a country, you realize that there are diverse and competing stakeholders. There are various institutional and administrational units, each with their silos, boundaries, capabilities. And for every idea, there's always be an opposition. And each of these diverse stakeholders have diverse objective functions they're trying to maximize. So when you think like a country, then you're thinking DPGs. When you think like an organization, you will not get DPG. The second is, think, therefore, ecosystems and not systems. When you're thinking like an organization, you'll think like a system. You assume you can control everything in that system. But when you're thinking ecosystems, you have to cooperate. Different ecosystems have to cooperate with each other, right? There's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of negotiation. There's a lot of co-creation that happens. And it can be very frustrating, but that is the hallmark that you're on the road to creating a DPG. And a third is think value for the user, think the values you're trying to put into the DPG, and think that the value of the DPG comes only from usage. It does not come from building technology. It does not come from better features, more features. The next is, when you're thinking of building, do not think of building the equivalent of cars and trucks. You're building roads and rails. The thinking has to be minimal. You're doing the absolute minimum possible. If it is Aadhaar, you're only doing one thing, proving identity. Because at the scale of India, you have to think about equity, you have to think about inclusion, you have to think about those with smartphones, with feature phones, with no phones, right? And this kind of thinking will essentially bring you down to what is the absolute minimum the DPG must do. And and when you're building something, you have to think the next 20 to 30 years. It's not enough to build a perfect product for that time. You have to think about with evolvability of technology, with more technology coming in, how does your DPG become better, right? You have to factor in evolvability into the design of the DPG. These are some of the things I think in terms of do's.
Great. Mahesh?
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay. See, I would say, firstly, for all those who will be involved in developing, this entire public rail, I would say it is very important for you to have a lot of patience. It is not a commercial institution which you'll think every week you are able to develop and show something. And the other part is you should be extremely inclusive, because whatever you develop, when you go and ask the actual participants, you should be very open to your criticism, okay, that it can be improved this way, improved that way. But at least what we have seen is it's very, very important that, whatever you do, especially the thing, right, specs, it should be blessed or owned by, like actually the government or something like that. Otherwise, it's not very easy sometimes for the folks to implement it. Example, like what we are doing in the space of the account aggregator, because it is blessed by all the financial regulators, you see the banks and NBFCs who are actually using it. But if it is not owned by an institution, the actual specs, it becomes a problem. Afterwards, what happens is you may have specs, everything may look good. You have to partner, you have to seed and work very closely, the first few years with some excellent technology service providers, because it is those institutions which will actually go and have your specs implemented. And it is, very important to see to that, okay, the participants who actually, come in the beginning, who we call as the, like it has to be extremely, startups may not actually work. But see, for example, in our account aggregator, we were very fortunate that all the large private banks, that they actually came on. So when the large institutions actually bless your work, what indirectly happens is the entire ecosystem feels that, this entire DPG is actually there to stay, or is over here.
Thanks, Mahesh. That was an interesting point you made about the big companies coming on board. Rishi?
Thanks. So, look, I work on the credit piece, right, which is the Open Credit Enablement Network. And, just building on what Mahesh and Shankar said, I think one of the most important things is changing your mindset. So, coming from the private sector, you tend to think of building products within a framework of rules, right? These are the regulations, this is what I have to stay within. I think in this role and job that what we're trying to do is you have to imagine what the end state is. And in our particular, like in the OCEN end state, it is like, can I deliver sachet credit in less than 10 minutes to anyone in the country? The rules are for us to frame, right? Obviously with ecosystem feedback, so that's a big change. Like you have to say there are no rules, there are no fences. Now how would I build an ecosystem? And then you work backwards on what needs to change to make that a reality. So that's one big learning. The second one is, look, the way this works typically is you go concept sell it to the ecosystem, then you execute a reference implementation to show everyone that it works, and then the third step is to scale. Now, during the concept and the concept stage and the reference implementation build stage, I think, what Mahesh said, patience is really key, right? Because large organizations are building the muscle to be able to do something completely new. Like NBFCs, are more agile, but banks you'll hear say that, look, I don't want to give a loan below 25,000 bucks. It's not, worth it for me to do that. And you have to go convince them, no, it is worth it for you to give a 160 rupee loan for a 90-day period, right? So it takes a lot of time and effort. You start with the CEO, you go down to the CRO, you go to the compliance officers, the business heads, the legal guys. So it takes months before someone is even agreeing to do this, and then a few more months to participate, because the structures are built for manual processes. They haven't built the tech, and which is why, like Mahesh said, you need a big TSP ecosystem. So extreme patience, right? It takes time. It takes time to build up, and then it explodes over time. The other thing is to be extremely transparent and, as Mahesh said, open to feedback. There's no point in hiding anything because you're building this for the ecosystem, not to sound like a politician, but it's for the people, by the people, and for the companies also in the ecosystem. So it's best to take feedback and then evolve this slowly to what is the best state or the most evolved state for that particular time period. So that's what I think. I mean, and the final thing is this openness to feedback, right? It's a double-edged sword because you'll find lenders wanting to stay the way they are. Like people don't want the status quo disrupted, and all of us being in tech, you are trying to disrupt that status quo because they are afraid that, if this, it gets tech-enabled, then smaller players will be able to compete with my distribution. Smaller players are worried that larger players will have lower cost of capital, etc. So there's all this fear mindset also, which you have to get, work through and convince them to get on with it. But I mean, once the hard work is done, we are actually in between stage 2 and 3 currently on OCEN. It becomes relatively easier, but I think it'll be say what UPI is today to payments, 6 years in, I think it'll probably take that long, if not longer, for it to happen with credit as well. So that's my learning.
And someone who knows the value of patience more than a lot of other people, Kiran, how about you?
Morning, everyone. So the digital public goods I've been working on is in healthcare. So probably not as familiar as some of the other people sitting here. So this is the Ayushman Bharat digital mission. And it's a far more complex. I think sometimes in UPI, you can't have UPI if the banks don't participate. And so you have to convince maybe 20, 25 banks to participate. In healthcare, we have 200,000 providers who need to really come on board and say, okay, I'm going to participate, right? So in terms of success, I think, you're asking what could make something successful. I think one thing that, at least in healthcare, we found that while there are tons of potential use cases, I think picking the ones that the ecosystem and the entities who want to participate value the most, and then hammering that down as the first set of use cases. I think being very thoughtful about picking that, I think, is quite important. The second thing that we are also finding, and it's more, I think in some of the other ones also we have had this challenge, which is the economic model for these use cases something that the participants are happy with, right? If you don't have that economic model, I think, again, getting that adoption and that stickiness seems to be quite tricky. The third thing is actually what is all of these DPIs ultimately is about, there is a DPI, there is a bunch of tech, but it's really about an ecosystem before you can really reach consumers and participants. Now, who is this entity who is actually helping build the DPI? What level of trust do they actually have with the ecosystem participants to bring them together? I think has been very, very important. I think success of a DPG is going to significantly dependent on the kind of entity, what kind of powers and structure, how much, with the government, distance from the government also, it's going to have. And I think that balance, I think all of us in the different DPGs actually have very different structures. And I think that's an evolving area, and I think it's going to be interesting for as India experiments with these models. I think that's also something that we'll probably explore as to what's the right way to structure the governance layers of a DPG.
Thanks, because I think on this panel we have very different sets of governance models, which is talk. Yeah, Nitin.
So thank you, Sanjay. One of the advantages and also the disadvantages of being last in the row is that all that you were thinking is the answer has been covered by the previous participants. So because everyone has 3 points, so I really had to cook 3 points. But on a serious note, there are 3 very key learnings. I think in some form, all the eminent panelists have actually covered it. But I'd want to just summarize and then try to give them a different shape basis my experience. There are 3 most important things, at least that I take as a learning, building the second large digital public good. One is to phase out the requirement, phase out the project. Don't try to build everything on day one, right? You identify the small, while keep having a vision, a large vision, the big picture, but make sure that you break that whole big picture into smaller milestones and try to achieve these milestones, fail fast, recover, and then move on. Be ready for accepting the change to your path. I mean, you may have a vision, but then your way to realize that vision would definitely be different. I mean, you may have started with something in the beginning with some path in mind, and you may actually change it depending upon the learning that you have. The second important point that I would want to stress upon is don't build for India or world. Build with India and with the world. Collaborate. Don't try to crack any problem on your own. Keep the stakeholders in your mind when you're actually building something and build with them. One of the key learnings that at least I have had personally, building GSTN. When initially we went out, we basically simply built a software with certain CAs in mind and developed it and then delivered it, which basically created a havoc in the ecosystem. After which we basically went to each state, major cities, and then we started talking to the real users of the system. And we started taking those feedbacks, and after that, a lot of learning came in. The very word that has been written on the portal actually meant differently for different people. So this was the second most important point. And third point, of course, keeping stakeholders handy. And stakeholder is not just an ecosystem. It is also the interest of the stakeholders which are involved in the decision making. Government also has a stake into what we are building, right? You cannot really take government often build for the world and then, you know, hope that it works, because that whole ecosystem has to work in a regulated environment just to make sure that there are no inefficiencies and you know, things start falling through the crack. So these are, in my opinion, 3 core learnings that I have had, you know, from my experiences building the DPG.
So, you know, essentially run a marathon in 100-meter sprints, collaborate, network, partner, build ecosystems, have enormous patience, and think in terms of creating economic value for everybody. Else there is no real incentive for others to participate. So are some of the quick summary of what you guys said. Now, let me come to each of you so that we'll sort of go a little deeper into each of your own areas. Starting with you, Shankar. At EkStep, you've got a DPG in the broad area of education. We've seen a massive spike in online education, all of that, thanks to COVID. Now, given that you're operating as an open source DPG play in education, how would you characterize the uniqueness of what you have to offer vis-a-vis all the other big private players out there who are non-DPG?
Firstly, what EkStep Foundation is a philanthropic organization. So we build open source technologies and then anybody can use it. So we partnered with the government of India to create a platform called Diksha using our open source project called Sunbird. You can go to sunbird.org. It's a set of building blocks as digital public goods. Diksha, in the last 4 years, has gone on to become the world's largest, most diversified education platform in the world.
Please repeat that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want the audience to hear, because a lot of this is not known.
Yeah. It's not known. Government is not the best at doing a sales job, right? The world's largest, most diversified, free-to-use school platform in the world. 200,000 plus pieces of content. 32 languages, including dialects of India like Gond, Halbi, etc. Content created by more than 12,000 teachers, NGOs which are out there. All through trusted institutional sources like the 60 plus boards of education. 60 billion plus minutes of learning in the last 5 years. 8 million teachers who have taken online courses and between them have got 100 million plus verifiable credentials that they have completed the course. The same technology is in all of your pockets. If you've got a COVID certificate, it has a verifiable QR code. It comes from Sunbird. That again is the power of DPG. Once you build it, others can use it in other sectors, in other contexts, in other countries. So Sunbird essentially is a set of building blocks, each providing a very specific capability. The capability to access relevant, trusted content through a physical means, QR code as an example, is one building block. So today, 600 million textbooks in India are approximately carrying 15 billion QR codes, which become GPS points for the learner to say, I'm on this topic, I want more digital content. Imagine if that is opened up from the textbooks to the ecosystem, where a Byju's can offer, use my app, I'll get you better content for physics than Diksha. An NGO can say, I will offer content in your local language because you don't have good content. So to go back to your question, a DPG that can be leveraged by the whole ecosystem, including Sarkar Samaj Bazaar, is how we will solve our education problem, not through a better app, a better platform, a better technology. Because at the heart of it, and I've been part of the Aadhaar startup team and now here, education is a lot about trust, it's about habits, it's about years and years of doing the same thing before you see any results. It's not technology to replace human beings, it's technology to augment human beings. So when there's a special educator in a tribal area working with a differently able child, how can the technology help that teacher there, the parent? That is how India is innovating in terms of technology, right? The power of UPI is a large extent because of a simple QR code. And it is these building blocks that as EkStep we are creating, we are working with a lot of ecosystem to see how it can be created in a lot of ways. So it's just the start. And NDR, National Digital Education Architecture, which is the equivalent of India Stack for education, It's a policy of the government of India. We were part of the committee. That policy is being open to the ecosystem. In fact, this afternoon at 2 p.m. there's a workshop to get public feedback on the policy. So in the coming months, we expect to see a lot of action. State governments, local governments, for-profits, not-for-profits, each leveraging these building blocks that India talks about, 36 of them, to either create those building blocks as a public good or consume it. So it's an exciting time, and like with other things like what Kiran said and Nitin said, India will take this to the world. Already 17 countries are interested across Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, of course, around India's neighbors. They want to take the technology, and India in turn has offered Diksha itself as a public good for the rest of the world. It is India's contribution to the world. Anybody can go and take the code and build their own platform with nothing to do with India. That is the Indian model, and that is what we are excited about. Thank you.
Incredible stuff. Essentially ties in with what all of you have said. You're not competing, you're collaborating, you're building the underlying guardrails on top of which, let's say, Byju's and others can work off.
Yeah. Nandan calls it, we love to be called as plumbers. We're not interior designers, right? But if the plumbing is not there, that house not going to smell pretty. It might look good, right? But plumbing, in a way, is also at the heart of DPG.
Absolutely. So coming to you, Mahesh, you are literally created a new organization, created a new set of entities that is doing stuff that very few people, I'm sure, in this room are aware of, but very critical in that it empowers people when they have to deal with financial information, either as a borrower, as a lender, as a transactor, etc. Please talk to us about what account aggregator is and how it benefits the end user.
Sure, Sanjay. So, even before I explain what an account aggregator does, I think you all understand, okay, that after we started using the UPI app, it removed the entire friction in the entire payment space. It was very, very easy, like if you had to give me, like anything. In the past, I had to share with you my bank statement, and the amount of friction is very high. And also, we had an issue about the privacy, because I have to share with you, my bank account number, even though it had to be it is not going to be an everyday payment, a one-time payment. So the UPI, you saw the way it was done, it has removed the friction. The account aggregator also, it will do exactly the same thing. It makes it very easy for you to share, any of your financial information. It could be your bank statement, your insurance policy, any of those, or your, like example, portfolio investment. So until now, when you go to a bank and when you apply for a loan, okay, to a large extent, they look at only, with your bank statement. Okay, but there are many of us who have, something more, like, you have FDs, investments, which are not held in the same bank. So it becomes very, very hard when you apply for a loan or anything to go to each of your institutions to get the hard copy, of the statements and have that, signature of somebody from that institution. It becomes very hard. Also, what is happening is this entire space, account aggregator or any of us, what we are working here, we want to ensure it has a huge impact in the country, and it will, even like anybody, whether it's a street vendor or an auto rickshaw driver, should be able to use any of our products. So now if somebody wants to go and apply for a loan, and which actually happens, which we may not understand, we do know many people who apply for an everyday loan of like only say 800 rupees or something like that. Now, if they have to apply for a loan with a bank, it won't work out. You can't expect a street vendor, to get a hard copy of the statement, walk into a bank, fill the form, and apply for a loan which will be, they take the loan in the morning and in the evening it is paid off. So for all such things, all these people, they go to the private lenders where they pay an interest rate of every day of up to 10%. Every day up to 10%. But with account aggregator, what happens, the one who wants to take a loan from the phone, like how using UPI, you are able to make a payment. From the phone, you are easily able to, share your bank statement. Okay, and any bank, will be happy to read the statement because it will be in your digital form. It will have your digital signature of your bank. So which means nobody is able to tamper your bank statement. And instantly, instantly, the lender is able to tell you whether are you going to get a loan, and if it is approved instantly using UPI, they're able to get the money. So with account aggregator, you are able to share any of your information, and anybody who is seeking your information, they are required to also declare what is the purpose for which they are going to request for the information and for how long they want to use the information. As of now, what is happening, when you apply for a loan or anything else, you give your statements and you don't know who all are in that bank or NBFC is able to see the statement, for what it is used. Is it used only for loan or is it something else? Is it used even after 1 year? With account aggregator, the entire control is with the citizen. They know for what this information is being used, for how long it is being used.
Thanks. Rishi, I've just been signaled by the organizers that we need to speed up just to make sure that we are on time. Am I right? Excellent. Okay. So Rishi is responsible for something called OKEN, which again I'm quite certain very few people are aware of. Very quickly tell us what is OKEN and how does it solve the challenge that let's say an MSME faces with regard to accessing lending?
Sure. So let me start with the challenge, right? So look, manual processes are the enemy of being able to do sachet products. And today you could argue that lending is digital, but there's some version, they call it phygital, where there's some digital, some physical. And there are very few completely digital processes where you can actually get money almost instantly after applying for the loan. So that is the first problem. So if it costs 3,000 to 5,000 rupees to convert a customer to acquire one, logically, like if you know banking enough, usually you need a 3 to 5 lakh rupee loan to justify acquiring that customer. So that obviously excludes the whole bottom of the pyramid. The second problem is all these processes are non-standard. Like, so each bank will have its own APIs, own various steps and so on. And Amazon, Flipkart will have their own steps. And in the negotiation, you lose a lot of time. Very few integrations happen. So they have happened, but obviously in a very chaotic manner. So OKEN solves two problems. One is it's a completely digital flow. So all the other digital goods that you're aware of, Aadhaar, UPI, account aggregator, are used in the flow. That brings down the cost of doing this manually. It's a completely digital process. The second piece is we've standardized it, even the steps. So that where it comes in the whole process of convincing lenders to do this. And the third thing we've done is we've started creating new use cases which lenders haven't done in the past. Look, for 40 years you give 3 or 4 types of loan products and you could call them different names, but essentially they're the same. I'll give you money paid back in installments, so on, that sort of product, right? Now, what we've done is we've started with a reference use case called Gem Sahay, which is built with the government e-marketplace for purchase order financing. That is live. As a pilot, we've given about 15 crores of loans. And what we're most proud of is the size of the smallest loan, 160 rupees. For a 90-day loan or something like that, and you wonder why would someone take a loan, but they have. The average ticket size is about 40,000 and the largest is about 10 lakhs. So the use case works now, and this is all happens from the start of the user journey to money in the account in less than 10 minutes, right? So that is the first use case. The second one we're building with SIDBI, it's called GST Sahay for invoice financing. And then finally, we'll open it up to the market. So think about it's like a Spice Money, which operates in the rural areas, doing milk receipt financing for dairy farmers, or even financing a water buffalo. So all these use cases which previously lenders wouldn't touch because they were very expensive to do, which we've now reduced the cost, and we work with the various infra providers also to try to reduce the cost so that it becomes viable. And the last thing I'll say before, stopping, Tata Capital is live on this, and one of the things that business had said to us resonates with how this is so inclusive for the whole country. Is like, we would have never opened up a branch in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, but through this reference implementation, we have been able to give the first few loans over there, and that's what has changed their mindset, because you don't need establishment costs anymore. You can just lend and collect digitally, and I think that's what will change, and that is true inclusion, where you can actually have small NBFCs compete with large lenders, so it's not only inclusive for the users, it's also inclusive for companies. It's not that you have to be at scale to be able to participate. So that's what OCEN is going to attempt to achieve going forward.
So just tell everybody what OCEN stands for.
So it's the Open Credit Enablement Network.
Thanks. So coming to you, Kiran, you're dealing with something that is mind-bogglingly complex, given the number of entities, state, center, multiple providers, even worse, insurance companies, citizens, et cetera, Given all of that, what is the vision for NHA? And given it's a long process, right? How do you think we will achieve it?
I think we won't have time to cover all of that. So let's talk a bit about what we are at least trying to do at a very high level, right? I think all of us have been experiencing some form of digital healthcare. I can't remember, almost certain that everybody in this room got their COVID report digitally as a PDF. Now the problem is that we aren't really creating longitudinal health records. Like if you really want to look at your long-term health, ideally it's been easy for you to collect all your health records digitally. So that's the first problem we are solving. The way we do it is, each of you have to get yourself something we now call as an Ayushman Bharat health account. Just like you have a UPI app, there are now 5 apps out there. So you can just download any of these apps and actually get your Abha. And then when you go to a hospital, you share it. So if you go to any of Karnataka's government hospitals, KCG, Jayanagar General, CV Raman, you will see a little QR code out there. You take one of these apps, you scan it, instantly you're registered with the hospital software. So fully interoperable. You don't know what the software on the other side is. You're using a different app. And now any health record that hospital produces automatically starts showing up on your phone, and you starts getting added to your digital record. So this is one flow that we are doing. Now that you have all of your records, you can share it with your consent with any other doctor or insurer or whoever wants it. And of course, a lot of people are looking at how do I look at those records to give you better information for your own personal health and fitness, right? So one big problem that we are trying to solve is this personal health information flows, right? The second area that the government is trying to solve, and it's something more B2B, is really between how your insurance payment flows works, between payers and providers. That's kind of pretty broken, so I won't get into it. But we are seeing a lot of interest and traction between healthcare providers and payers for these new standards that will enable them to process these claims and track it at a far, far lower cost than they do today.
And you're creating a new language for...
Yes, it's called the Health Claims Exchange to be able to do that. The last bit is actually for digital health services. So imagine today that the best experience for a teleconsultation requires both your doctor and your patient to actually use the same application provider. Now what we are doing is, but doctors actually don't like doing that. They are like, hey, any of my patients should be able to use any app, right? So what UHI, or the Unified Health Interface, which is modeled on the same thing as Beacon and ONDC does, is it allows the doctor to use any app of their choice. And they can go and say, okay, I am available at these times, this is the price I want to charge for a teleconsultation and so on. And they give away their doctor ID to the patient. And a patient can find the doctor by just putting in the doctor ID, booking an appointment, make a payment, share their health records, get records back, completely interoperable. So I think, and that's just one use case of UHI. So 3 big areas that we are trying to solve. Again, like I said, picking initial use cases and trying to get it to go, but long journey, because I think the big issue is absolutely no regulatory support, and it's all completely voluntary, which means unless we can convince healthcare providers that there is a good reason for them to participate.
And insurers as well.
And insurers as well. It's going to be a very tough ecosystem to kind of kick off.
Got it. So, clearly, but these are all unbelievably transformational in their fundamental design, right? And that is what I think all of us should back, because we forget that Aadhaar itself, right, is 13 years old, UPI is 6 years old. So the half-life is decreasing, right? And that's the important thing. So coming to you, Nitin, you know, we heard your excellent presentation on ONDC and all of that. One of the big concerns that everybody has, you talked about preventing monopolies from capturing spaces, the rise of powerful entities and so on, which is what one of the big challenges in e-commerce today is. And you're, through your unbundling, etc., you're attempting to make it more democratic. The question is, how do you ensure in ONDC that that same asymmetry of power is not presented? So if some of the large platforms come onto ONDC, how do you ensure they don't sort of distort the play?
Sanjay, this is a very valid concern. And in fact, when we started discussing ONDC as a concept, this came to everybody's mind. How do we ensure that ONDC as an ecosystem do not become sort of just 2 or 3 large players defining these standards? So I think, as I said, you know, during my presentation also, this is actually trying to build with India, right? You are trying to create a stakeholder ecosystem which includes the smaller players. So that is one, you know, main thing where we are trying to understand problems. So for example, the whole reconciliation framework that we have built, one of the fundamental problems with the sellers was that their working capital, their cost of capital was actually increasing because of the delays in working capital settlements, which increased their cost also and which increased the prices also, which made them less competitive than the others. So as part of the reconciliation framework, we had made sure that right from the point of you know, digital transfer, we have an API contract, right, where once the transaction takes place,
that's all blockchain kind of thing.
We'll come to that. It's not yet blockchain, but then the system has been built in such a way that tomorrow, if you have a blockchain, it'll actually work and it'll do all the you know, cases that Kiran and Mahesh also talked about, where it becomes an authority, a source of authority for truth. For you to seek loans, create financial instruments, create credit ratings, create badges, all those use cases are possible. So reconciliation and settlement will ensure your reputation is also at, you know, is taken care of. At the same time, the money movement becomes faster, right? We are saying the money actually moves from one direction to another and value from other to here. Earlier what used to happen is there used to be a huge reconciliation of monthly 30 to 45 day cycle. And we know that, you know, there are some large players who actually practice it. By trying to make this ecosystem more efficient of money movement, automatically your working capital cost, since your cost of capital is coming down, your working capital you know, flow, your capital turnover actually becomes much faster. So that is one part. The second part is we are also working on nudge ecosystem, where we are actually going out to technical, you know, to technology partners, asking them to build for these guys, right? So, for example, there are 3 partners who've actually built a completely zero-touch platform. You can simply go to any of the cloud, you will find e-commerce as a service, you click that service, it automatically, you know, creates a complete serverless, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little technical here, but the whole platform gets ready in under 30 minutes, including the catalog that you have to have, right? By enabling such kind of a platforms, and you know, we are actually now reaching out to these small towns, small kiranas, small you know, small time retailers to start onboarding onto them, and they themselves become network participant taking control of their own business. So some of these initiatives in together, and of course the ODR mechanism that we talked about a while ago, where grievances, issues, and the disputes are bound to happen in an unbundled and transaction-oriented ecosystem. If you build a setup, if you build a framework that enables, you know, seamless transfer of issues and grievances in both directions, from respondent to the complainant and complainant to the respondent, I think all of these put together will ensure that there is not one or few large market players will take control of the ecosystem.
Okay, so that's very, very good news, because that's one of the big concerns everybody has. How do you ensure that the big guys don't capture it? So, you know, so we've got educated thanks to Shankar. We were able to borrow some money with our consent and share it thanks to Mahesh and Rishi. We've taken care of our health, and we know our commerce is also safe. So thanks very much for all of that. So what I'll do is, I think we're running out of time. Muskan, how are we doing on time? 5 more minutes? Great. So I think we've got time perhaps for one question. And please make sure it's a question, not a long speech. I think that hand went up first, right? So I'll have that young man there on the extreme right. Yeah, start. So we'll have one question from here and one question from the other side. But please ask a specific question. State your name.
Yeah, I'm Mustafa Sharif here. My question is to Mr. Nitin. Okay, don't you think with the ONDC, you are going to crush or affect the startups and the existing players in this industry?
I'll try to be loud.
Okay, don't you think with the ONDC, you're going to crush or affect the existing players or startups in this e-commerce industry?
No, I didn't get your name. You are?
Mustafa Sharif. Mustafa Sharif.
Okay.
Mustafa Sharif.
Answer is no, and it's something that we've been talking. We are creating an interoperable framework, right? We are not creating a new framework to basically, disable the existing players in the market. The existing players in the market will play a larger role now, right? I mean, effectively, today they had if there is any slack anywhere available, right? And that is actually not getting utilized. Utilizing the slack itself makes sure that your overall efficiency goes up, your costs come down, your revenue goes up, and so your profit also goes up. I have a feeling that the existing players have a lot to gain from ONDC rather than to not gain from it, for a very obvious reason, because their market expansion and market reach for their buyers as well as for their sellers actually increases significantly. So on the contrary, I see, this is a unique concept that will provide avenues for massive growth into their
Nitin, I'll have to interrupt in the interest of time. One last question from this side, please. If no question from this side, then we'll come here. And there's a lady at the back. Yeah, sorry about this. We're running really short on time. Yes, please. Last question, and then I think we're done, right, Muskan? Yeah.
So when you say blockchain, how do you intend to implement it? Because there are so many ways you can automate operations and just cut costs, wipe them off.
Yeah.
So how do you intend to start with it?
Now that's a question perhaps we can deal with offline, how to implement stuff. One question, please, quick, the mic here, and then we are done. Short, brief, crisp.
My question is for Kiran. Having that centralized health record for the citizens is a good initiative, but it also comes with the flip sides, right? So how do we take care that insurance companies basically will not misuse that particular information and not exceeding the prices or not offering the insurance and things like that?
Thank you.
Yeah, so firstly, it's not a centralized architecture. The whole health record initiative is actually completely federated. So people who create the records actually keep the records, and then the central system only has a piece of it.
And they share based on consent.
Yeah. So, and it's all consent driven. So there's a lot of safeguards that are being put into place so that there's no misuse. I mean, a lot more detail that has to go into what the consent framework does, but a lot of the ideas, I mean, abuse of consents is something that I think every DPG is looking at very closely and will essentially, a lot of safeguards will come into play.
Including ODR and all that. Great. Thank you all very much. All that remains for me is to say thank you for coming here. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I hope it was useful for all of you. And thank you very much for being an awesome audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists for this very insightful session. I now request Mr. Sridhar Pabishetty, who is the founding director of Kautilya School of Public Policy, to please come on stage and give away the tokens of gratitude to our wonderful panelists. A round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, I also have a small announcement to make. Our next session, which is on driving innovation beyond the venture capital support ecosystem, will be starting very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause.